Next speaker is Ewen, who's going to tell us about a little trip he made a couple of months ago through the Andes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, never before have I felt quite so comprehensively outclassed. The only thing I would say in my favour, and it's a very small thing, is that I'm not certifiably bonkers. You might have noticed a little line of ambulances sitting outside in Exhibition Road. That's to take our other speakers back to their institutions. I'm afraid this really is the lightweight end of the evening. None of the great stories that we've been hearing can compare with taking a short pony trek in the Andes. However, we did have one notable example of real endeavour, and I'll come to that later on. Sir Evelyn Webb Carter has had a most successful career as a soldier. That really is a shame, because he would have made an even better Butlins redcoat. He's a holiday organiser par excellence. Every couple of years or so, he takes a group of his friends to some obscure part of the world to follow generally a pretty obscure military campaign. This February, it was following the campaign of General San Martin, the liberator of Chile from Spain. He crossed the Andes in 1816. Between 1810 and 1830, 7 men were responsible for leading the liberation of South America from Spain. Names like Simon Bolivar, Admiral Lord Cochrane may be familiar to British audiences. General San Martin rather less so, but he was responsible for the liberation of Chile between 1816 and 1818, along with the splendidly named Bernardo O'Higgins, a Chilean of Argentine descent. Sorry, of Irish descent. Here's a picture of the pair of them on their crossing. We followed the route of their army over one pass over the Andes. That's the... I don't think I can get that to work either, but it's the Northern Red Line. Is it? Yeah. It's a Northern Red Line. We travelled from... thank you. Yeah, that one there. We travelled from Argentina into Chile. It was a ride of about 5 days, and we then went back over the southern pass, which San Martin had used as a subsidiary route for one of his columns, and that took a further 4 days. As coincidence would have it, 2 former Light Dragoons officers 3 years earlier, Johnny Arkle and Andrew Selby Bennett, had ridden part of the same route while on a round-the-world trip, having left the regiment. Here's how they reported it on YouTube.
Well, here we are, as hoped and promised, on the border between Argentina on our right and Chile on our left. We've just ridden up along the Rio Rosan, and really it's all about these 2 characters here. You've got General San Martin, who's Argentinian, and his Chilean contemporary, Bernardo O'Higgins. And back in 1818, these 2 characters crossed over from Argentina and into Chile to liberate Chile from the Spanish rulers. And in doing so, by crossing this point here, they declared war on the Spanish Empire. So pretty punchy stuff, and it's pretty cool to be here, to be honest.
Yeah, we've had an amazing few days riding up the mountains to get here. We've got 3 horses, a mule
in our background down there,
a mule and a donkey, Lucifer. And our guide is Daniel, who's been fantastic, a good old boy, very solid.
So hellish riding.
Yeah, we have had some hellish riding. There's been moments when we've had to get off, quite a lot of moments when we've had to get off and lead the horses. At one point, one of the horses fell over and cut itself.
Blood everywhere. Precipitous little paths, no wider than your hand. Real heart-thumping stuff.
And the main thing that's been the most exciting thing is the landscapes here. We've gone from sort of dramatic cliffs and
I think we've had quite enough. Thank you
Steep.
very much. Great stuff, eh? Whatever happened to British understatement? What these two scallywags didn't know at the time was that within 3 years, the veracity of their YouTube posting would be tested to destruction, as it turned out, by a lieutenant general, a major general, a naval commander, and a couple of Bakshi colonels. Let's just pick out a few quotes from that little clip and compare them with what we actually saw. Hellish riding. I make no comment. There were moments, lots of moments, when we had to get off and lead the horses. Well, there was actually one short stretch of a couple of 100 yards. Paths no wider than your hand. I mean, that looks like a motorway to me. Real heart-thumping stuff. Our hearts were thumping so hard we had to lie down. Blood everywhere. Well, yes, horses do cut themselves in rocky country. You wrap them up with a bandage and carry on. Well, apart from that, well done, lads. Really good report. So we thought that the dispatch was really aimed at a load of very young and very impressionable girls back in England. But great drama queenery. Moving rapidly on, Hugh McDermott was the man that we asked to make the arrangements in Argentina and Chile, and he did this brilliantly. Half man, half gaucho. He knows Argentina absolutely backwards. He's ridden across South America himself and is an excellent horseman. I can thoroughly recommend his company, McDermott's Argentina, if you want to do something relatively normal, not quite in the same league as our other speakers. San Martin. That is Hugh. San Martin crossed the Andes with no less than 10,000 mules. His campaign was a model of good planning and excellent logistics. Carrying cannon that were designed to be mule portable, they crossed the Andes with minimal casualties. In the main, we rode mules. Tough, fit, sure-footed, and unexcitable. But just beware of the back end, particularly when they're being loaded. We took with us a train of baggage mules too. One of these, known as Calin Gastino, was the most extraordinary character. Not prepared to stay with the gang, she'd wander off wherever she wanted and probably ended up doing double the distance of any of the other mules. Every now and then, she would sit down. It might be anywhere. If you heard the sort of clunk-clunk of the cooking pot on her back, it was a really alarming sound because she would brush past you on fairly narrow tracks, completely unaware of her width with her panniers on. Nobody was pushed off over the edge. The gauchos would put up with this for a while and then put her into detention. A little health and safety point. Don't try that trick on a horse. It would go bonkers. The gauchos, who looked after us and looked after the horses and the mules, put up the tents, did the cooking, are an extraordinary breed. Brilliant horsemen, they are as tough as nails. In a snowstorm, I think I had 6 layers of clothing on top. The gauchos had a light jacket, a shirt, no gloves, light pair of trousers, all with holes in them, and they made one feel extremely wet. Evelyn produced names for many of them. This is Boss Crackers. French Specs is on the right. And this is Carpet Slippers. Their spurs were ferocious, but they were never actually applied. The rattle created by a small movement of the foot was enough to gee up any horse. Cold shoeing was done as and when necessary. If they had a fault, it was to hog the campfire, leaving the punters out in the cold while cheerfully quaffing our whiskey. I think they probably thought that we needed a bit of toughening up. One complication that we did have was that the Chileans don't allow Argentine livestock into their country. So Hugh had to arrange replacement horses and mules to be waiting for us at the border in the middle of the mountains. This worked very well indeed. And there are the horses and mules going back to Chile, having done their work. This is the Chilean equivalent of DEFRA. Who did a several-hour journey by mule to meet us at the border to make sure that we weren't bringing in any nasty livestock diseases. We would spend anything up to 12 hours a day in the saddle. The pace was slow but steady. We had Western-type saddles covered with thick sheepskins, and those were perfectly comfortable. The scenery was spectacular, and although in most places the mountains were desert dry, there was a wide range of wildlife. A fine mountain hare broke cover at one stage from under our mules' hooves and raced away up the mountainside. Evelyn, who never travels abroad without A, his mountie hat, and B, his hunting horn, had the horn out of his saddlebags in a flash, and a lengthy and resounding "gone away" echoed around the mountains. This was almost the end of Evelyn. He went puce, he wobbled a bit, he turned a horrible shade of grey, and slumped forward in a heap in his saddle. Moral of the story, don't blow a hunting horn too enthusiastically in the rarefied air at 12,000 feet. Not, I'm sure, that one of you would do that. There are very few people in these mountain passes. We came across an Argentine army post in the middle of nowhere. The occupants were hospitality itself, and we had a highly convivial and whiskey-fired evening with them. A few of us in our party had been soldiers in 1982 and were intrigued to be in what would then have been enemy territory. Naturally, we were keen to avoid the use of the F word. Much more offensive to an Argentine than the four-letter variety. They refer to the islands as the Malvinas. One Argentine soldier who started drinking from the bottle at 4 p.m. might have raised the subject, but just wanted to be everybody's best friend, particularly the ladies. Frankly, none of them seemed at all interested in the F word, and it's only the rather tiresome president, Mrs. Kirshner, who raises the subject every time the Argentine economy takes a nosedive. But we were reminded that quite a sizable body of opinion in Argentina thought that it was thoroughly unsporting of us in 1982 to send professional troops against their conscripts. An interesting South American take on the British concept of fair play. We travelled in the South American summer, and we had a couple of days of unseasonably bad weather. We found ourselves crossing a pass at 14,000 feet with our horses belly deep in snow. As usual, the gauchos had the answer and sent the pack mules ahead of us to break the track. While we were waiting them to do this, I noticed Simon Mayle's horse in front of me, straining forward. She was slightly above, and I knew exactly what was about to happen. Couldn't do anything about it. I prayed that the horses are gelding. They fire forward. No such luck. The mare lifted her pretty little tail, the wind got up, and I received the overnight contents of her bladder full frontal. If you think fire hydrant rather than dripping tap, then that is what happened. And my friendship of 35 years with Mayle was strained to breaking point at that stage. Here's a picture of him a little later on, reflecting on the magnitude of his crime. Given the average age of the audience this evening, you're probably thinking that this was an expedition for old people, and with a couple of exceptions, you'd be absolutely right. The large majority of us were well on the wrong side of 50. I mentioned that we had an example of real endeavour, and here he is. Alan Reynolds, in his youth, the chief of the Royal Signals White Helmets Motorcycle Display Team. Where on earth you go, having reached that pinnacle of achievement, I don't know. But he went on to be a successful property developer, both in this country and America. He is 77. We had long hours in the saddle and the times when it was not comfortable. He raised not a single word of complaint. When we got back to Buenos Aires, we found ourselves in some louche bar with some elaborately tattooed and multiply pierced birds. The only one of us to get their number was Alan. He's a very dirty old dog. He's in the audience this evening, so if you see him, give him a pat on the back, and you might like to tell him that at his age, he really ought to be starting to give up those twin downfalls of many a sound man, fast women and slow racehorses, and stick to motorbikes. But I think there's a real moral here. If you keep doing stuff, you can go on almost indefinitely. If you stop, you sort of lose your nerve a bit and seize up. Over to Guy for a real adventure.